morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Imaginate Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. super early morning wake-up call out west and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday morning, June the 3rd. Yesterday, we kicked off the show just talking a little bit about some of the things going on in our world over the last few weeks, and obviously the conversation that we shared yesterday was with Rod Underwood, and he was talking about his experience as a black kid, an African American kid growing up. Born in New Orleans, growing up in Atlanta, and finding his way into the game, and just some of the things, the challenges he's experienced in his life being part of the game. Today, I want to bring on a friend of the show and a friend of mine to talk a little bit about some of these issues as well from a little bit different perspective. And the conversation we're about to have is one that number one is completely relevant and completely necessary. But it's also one that's not being had enough in American soccer and in the circles through of American soccer as well. And it's easy when things are going crazy, to put a black background up and claim solidarity and all of those things. And I am not, saying that we shouldn't, show signs of symbolism or solidarity at all. But what I'm suggesting is that we have to go farther. We have to actually roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, sacrifice, do things, and have conversations that maybe are out of your comfort zone. And so today, joining us on the show for this conversation about some of these issues is our friend, none other than the notorious Chris Kessel. Chris, how are you this morning?
I'm great today. How are you doing, Daniel?
Doing well. All things considered, but I'm looking at things going on in the world, and I've read some of your posts recently, and I've read posts from other friends, and I've had other friends, send me comments and other things, and it just confirms to me that we're not having enough of the right conversations, not just in culture, but also within the American soccer ecosystem, and I think there's never been a better time than right now to have these conversations in light of everything going on. I don't remember if it was you. It may have been you. It may have been Monica, your lovely wife, who posted this the other day. I think it may have been her originally, talking about the things that you've done in your community, to break down barriers, to purposefully and intentionally be more inclusive with the league and with the club, and trying to bring in all kids from all walks of life into the game. And, when I read that post, obviously, knowing you, I was certainly, proud of the things that she was talking about you. But it really struck me in terms of, what we see in American soccer, which is this, you'll see words, you'll see platitudes, you'll see, these, statements when it's politically fashionable to put out these statements of support, but we don't see a lot of walking the talk out on a daily basis of actually building bridges. When you first kind of took over the club and decided, hey, I want to try to grow this club, but I want the club to look like this community. You know, what drove you to think that way, to do that? And secondly, in actually, you know, walking that walk out and having those conversations, what were some of those early conversations like in terms of trying to be purposefully inclusive with everyone in your community to be a part of the club there?
Well, you know, obviously, you know, in the getting a club up and running and everything, there's a whole lot going on. And, you know, me and my wife, and just to give, you know, some information that, you know, some of the listeners might not know, you know, obviously I'm white, my wife is black, you know, I have 3 biracial kids. We live in a very diverse neighborhood. The school that my kids go to is around 50% African American. You know, so it's my community, my neighborhood, even though what people think of West Virginia is just this monolithic white community, there are parts of it that are very diverse. And sorry, I'm standing outside if you can hear this garbage truck going by. But you know, we looked at the school, you know, the elementary school that my kids went to, our kids went to, and we said, you know, we have to make sure that these kids play. Like, it was that simple. You know, the game is a beautiful thing, and sports teach so much, and, you know, growing community. And if we wanted our club to be a pillar in the community and a cornerstone of what people thought of when they thought of our community, you know, the elementary schools and the middle schools and the high school that were in our catchment zone, we needed it to look like those. If we only focused on one segment, which is, you know, white kids are what pretty much play soccer in the United States, and white kids are what play soccer in West Virginia almost exclusively, you know. And if we really, truly in our hearts felt like, you know, we wanted our community to have a great club and something that, you know, people could be a part of and could believe in and were proud of, it needed to include everybody. So that was the driving thought process behind why we were so purposely inclusive. And there were a lot of conversations, you know, at the beginning. A lot of people were like, man, yeah, no, it's awesome. I've never thought about having the kids play soccer before. We'd love to try it. Brought them right out, right? But there were conversations, especially with friends, you know, because your friends will tell you the truth a lot of times when, you know, people that you don't know won't tell you. And the conversations, I can remember one specific one that was very, very blunt. And we've been friends for 20 years now, you know, and he said, Chris, you know, they don't want us playing the game. You know, they don't want us here. And I looked him in the eye and I was like, look, man, I don't care what they want. I want you here. You know, I want these kids here. And he's a very influential coach from some other sports. And, you know, he's a great community organizer. And he helped bring a bunch of kids over because, you know, instead of just saying, here's a flyer, you know, come and play, you know, I, you know, asked, you know, and I pleaded for him to help and to help me get more kids to come, you know, more African-American kids. And, you know, our club does look like our community. We're majority minority club, you know, and once we got it up and running, I made sure that, you know, there's one mosque in the city. It's really large. It's got like 650 families or something like that. And I made sure that I knew a couple of the guys that went to the mosque that were elders, and I made sure that I sat down and I went out to lunch with one of them, and I was like, look, I want to offer our club as a place for the members of the Muslim community in Charleston can come and play and participate. I know that you all have, things at the mosque. They actually built a sweet futsal court in the mosque. I mean, it's awesome. So, I mean, the kids were playing soccer. I wanted them to be included in the community and to be a part of something. And, I made sure that I went and asked and sat down and we ended up with several families bringing a lot of kids over, and it was awesome. And we did the same thing with it was a little harder to get the Hispanic community to start to participate, but we just continued to go and talk to people and went to the, we went to the Catholic Church and, that does mass in Spanish, and talked to talked and got people to come. I mean, we purposely sat out and went and had conversations, because at the end of the day, just not turning people away isn't enough. Okay. If you put out a flyer or you make a Facebook post and you say, yep, come and play soccer, and the only people that show up and play soccer are the people that are already playing soccer, that's not good enough. I mean, at the end of that, that's not good enough. And that's exactly what our thought process was. And that's exactly how we went about doing this. And it was successful. And I'm really proud. And I know that my wife is really proud. And I know that all the members of the club are really proud. And at this point, it has taken on a life of its own, because, at the beginning, and it wasn't just me, it was, the other people that I helped bring in at the beginning that were board members and coaches and, volunteer coaches. They were doing the same exact things that I was doing, that Monica was doing. And, everybody's proud, and it's created its own thing now. And it's just grown and blossomed, and it's beautiful. And, we have these club cookouts at the, we have all the teams play at home, a couple weekends a season, and we raise some money and we have a big giant cookout with a potluck. The club provides all the drinks and hot dogs. We make sure that we get like turkey dogs so everybody can eat them, and we don't have to, we have some and all this stuff, and everybody brings all these side dishes and the diversity of the food that's on display and how good it is, and the kids' exposure to everybody hanging out, and the families getting to know each other, and the parents getting to know each other that are crossing, racial and cultural and socioeconomic boundaries that otherwise wouldn't be crossed. It's amazing. And soccer is a tool to bring your community together and to, create positivity, instead of creating division. And that's what a soccer club is supposed to be. When you look around and you listen, to what people want out of community organizations, a soccer club can be all of it. We've done food drives, we've done, clothing drives, we've done all this stuff through our club. And it's sad to me, and it's disappointing to me that club leadership at every club in the United States, every club, big and small, volunteer driven, extremely expensive, pay to play, $4,000 a year for your U7 soccer club, aren't doing things and aren't purposely reaching into communities and aren't purposely finding, ways to bring communities together. And it's disappointing. And, me and you've talked about this a lot, that U.S. soccer doesn't, push for this. U.S. soccer is not pushing itself to be this. It's sad, and that's one of the reasons why, honestly, I've fought so hard, to try to change things, is because of how important I think soccer can be to this country, in every community, in every neighborhood, and as, an important institution that can start and grow and continue growing, and helping make our society a better place.
So, a couple things. The first thing I want to point out is, A lot of people view diversity and getting people involved in the game when we're having a conversation about race, diversity, socioeconomic status, etc., as an urban versus a rural problem or a suburban problem, right? So you'll hear these conversations being had, and you might read an article about getting minorities involved, or things are really expensive, and so we got to find ways to scholarship or get kids involved. But a lot of these conversations happen through this lens of we've got to find a way into our inner cities, and I am by no means suggesting that we don't do those things. Okay, so let me be clear. But what I want to bring up here is to make a point about what you're saying, and that is this is a broader issue than urban versus suburban versus rural. This is not just a geographical, zip code issue from the standpoint of, if you live in inner city New York or inner city Chicago versus, you live in the suburbs of Chicago or even further out in the middle of Illinois, et cetera, et cetera. That is one example. That is one way. That is one part of this conversation. But I think for too many within U.S. soccer, that's been where the conversation has ended. It's been this, well, soccer's running, throughout the country. There's a few small places where we've got to do some things, and some of these we've got to try to find some options for inner cities, and that'll be the buzzword, and they'll talk about they need to get some street soccer courts or futsal courts or some urban soccer fields built and whatever, et cetera, and again, I'm not saying that those are not real issues that need to be part of the conversation, but I want to highlight this, and that is something that you've just described is happening in West Virginia. Your intentionality about building bridges in the community, bringing people in from all walks of life, different colors of skin, different socioeconomic status, different cultures, different religions. They're all living in your community, and it's about bringing all of them in, and this is in West Virginia. As you know, I had a club a few years ago in Alabama. And we did a very similar thing, and we knocked on a lot of doors, and we had a lot of conversations, and we had kids that were playing in this small, non-pay to play. It was a free to play, travel club. It was small. I mean, we only had 25 kids, but we had, in the 25 kids, we had over 10 countries represented in every continent except Antarctica on the team in Alabama in a club of only 25 kids. So when people say, well, we try to go and reach out to the community, whatever, and I see your club and it's 99% white, I'm sorry. You're not actually getting out into the community. They're here. I know they're here. They're there. And those of us who have actually done the non-glamorous, tedious, long, work of building relationships and sitting down and having lunch, or in one of the areas where we had to go, I had to, fortunately, I had a couple assistant coaches one was originally from Colombia, the other one from Uruguay. And so they would go with me into some of these trailer parks and other places to speak to the Latino families. And I would open up with a greeting in Spanish, but I'm certainly not fluent enough to carry on a very long conversation. And so they would kind of pick up right after that, and they would basically vouch for our program and talk to the parents and reach out to them, and slowly over time we were able to build those relationships and get these kids coming from, like I said, all walks of life, different socioeconomic status, different colors of skin, different religion, different backgrounds, etc. And so a couple of things that I was hearing from you, and I wanted to point out because I think these would be helpful for others, is some qualities about some principles, some things that if you want to be serious about closing this gap and really addressing this issue in your local context. Number one is you got to be proactive. This has to be something that this is an active choice. This is part of your daily life. This is part of your ongoing conversations, and you have to, as you said, not put a sign up and say we welcome all, but you actually have to go into the community, knock on doors, and be proactive and show them, demonstrate to those people who are not at your club that you actually want them in your club. You have to go to them, not expect them to come to you. Second,
exactly. Let's just talk about that. Okay, let's talk about that. Like, I think that you made the perfect point. You have to build relationships. You have to use existing relationships. And if you don't have relationships, just think about that. If you don't have existing relationships in your life where you can go into communities, that don't look like you. And by that, I mean, if you're a white person and you run a soccer club and every single one of your friends is white, and every single person in every circle that you inhabit is white, I mean, think about that. Think about that. That's a lot of what is going on in the country right now, is because a lot of people segregate their lives, and a soccer club is not a place where segregation is allowed to live. Okay. So you have to go and build relationships with people. Like, if you have a bunch of existing relationships within the African American community, or at the mosque, or with Latino community, or whatever. If you got a bunch of friends that are aren't white people, this is going to be a lot easier task for you. And if you exist in an all white world, this is going to be a lot harder for you, and you're going to have to work. You're going to have to put in the work. This has to become a core tenet of what you believe your soccer club should be, because you're going to have to change, a lot about, how you intentionally meet people, to be able to pull this off.
Completely. And that brings me to the second kind of principle that I was hearing from you, and that is you have to be persistent, right? Mm-hmm. So proactive, you got to go out, you got to set intentions, you got to make it part of like your consciousness and a real focus of the ethos of your organization. But secondly, you've got to be persistent. You've got to be relentless. You've got to grind. You've got to actually follow through, walk the walk, put in the action, take the steps, knock on the doors, make the phone calls, have the uncomfortable conversations. If you want to be an inclusive club, there's a shining light that at the end of this I'm going to get to in a minute, but in the very beginning, you're going to have to be someone, especially if you are a predominantly white club or a predominantly Latino club, and you want to get other cultures involved in your club. It doesn't matter what your primary club makeup looks like. If it's kind of in the words of color, monochromatic, then there's a very likelihood that you are not connecting with your community. Now, what we're talking about is predominantly talking about the kind of this white issue, because in American soccer, for the most part, that is, the prevailing issue here is you have a bunch of soccer clubs and communities that are, skewed much higher than the local demographics, white. Not that there aren't, minority families involved in the club, but not necessarily in a reflective manner of the community. So,
right, not representative.
It's not representative. So, in this case, you've got to grind. You've got to go and do that hard work, and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. In those initial conversations. Now, here's the bright light at the end of the tunnel. It's something that you brought up as you were kind of telling your story of the club, and it's something that I've seen. You can eventually change the perception of your club in the community, where once you've reached kind of a tipping point, people start to actually change their view of you. And those who are involved in the club from all of these different, skin color, socioeconomic status, different neighborhoods, etc., start to become, they feel like they're part of the club, and now they become the ambassadors into their relationships and their friendships and other things, and they start bringing their friends. And that's when you know that you have actually begun to change the culture of your club, because now those who you personally had to go out and build relationships with and get them involved are now the ones bringing you their friends and the friends of their friends into the club. And now it starts to take a life of its own. It starts to do this on its own, because now you've actually changed the culture. So this does not mean that you have to go door knocking, every 6 months or every month or every weekend for the rest of your life to change the culture of your club. What it does mean, though, is that in those early days of transitioning your club to a club that is reflective of your community, it is going to be a bunch of uncomfortable conversations, awkward moments, you sitting down and trying to explain your vision for the community and how you want them involved, and all of these things that are kind of awkward and uncomfortable and what have you. But if you actually can get them into your club and you actually treat them with respect and really truly welcome them and make them feel part of your club, eventually you're going to get to a place where they start doing this for you with their own friends, and now you've actually done culture change. And you've actually changed your club to be reflective of your community, which is.
You want to know the best part about this process? The absolute best part is you're selling something that's easy to sell. Soccer is awesome. The kids are going to show up and they're going to love it. Like that's the thing that's happening here. You're selling something that's easy to sell. The kids are going to love playing the game. Like this is something that super pisses me off. I mean, it super pisses me off is that you see it all the time. Oh, well, black kids just don't like soccer. No, black kids love soccer, just like white kids and Latino kids and Asian kids. It's the world game. Like everybody loves soccer. It's super fun. Believe in the game. Believe in the game as a way to bring your community together. Like at the end of the day, this process is all about giving people enjoyment. And that's, you're going to hear that. Like when you have to go and have this conversation with people are going to say, oh, black kids just don't like playing soccer. And it's not true. Like it's patently not true. Don't ever be leery of the person that tells you that. Okay. Be leery of them, because they're not there to help.
When I was having this conversation with Rod Underwood that we shared yesterday on the show, that was one of the things that we talked about a little bit on air, but also off air, was his introduction into the sport. And his was a pure accident. I mean, he was too small, didn't weigh enough to go play American football, and so needed another sport to play. Had no soccer connection in his family at all. But there was a flyer at school, and he wanted to play a sport. He couldn't play football, American football, because he was too small. So he goes out and plays soccer, and the rest is history. Like, he was done. That's all he wanted to play. And so I view a lot of those statements that you bring up as myths. These are they're true because we want to make them true, not because they are actually true. Kids are kids,
right?
There are plenty of white kids that don't like soccer. There's going to be plenty of black kids that don't like soccer, but there's going to be plenty of black kids that do like soccer. So this idea that your skin color has anything to do with whether you're going to like soccer or not is ridiculous. So
it's used as a way to describe why people don't go and work harder at making sure their club includes everybody in their community. I mean, it's a preemptive excuse on why to not try. Like, that's all it is. And you have to get rid of those type of thought processes and ideas about it. That's what you have to do. You have to get rid of all those thoughts. I mean, it's interesting once you start doing it, the things that people are going to say to you, and the things that you're going to hear, because I've literally never heard anybody say, well, black kids don't like soccer. I'd never heard anybody say that until I started doing this stuff. And I never heard anybody say it don't try. But after the fact, I heard people say, well, I didn't think black kids really liked playing soccer. I thought they were just more into football. What would make you think that? That doesn't even make any sense. It's a fun game. Your kid likes it, right? It's soccer.
So I had my brother-in-law is a high school soccer coach, and one of his first high school soccer gigs was at a high school that was predominantly a black school, an African-American school. He's a white guy. And they have no youth soccer in the city. There's no youth soccer program at all. Now, this community produces and has produced historically, blue chip D1 / professional athletes. A bunch of NFL players have come out of here. There's athletes, that are, coming out of that high school. And so he comes in there, and they didn't even have a program when he got there. So he starts a soccer program, and he's got kids learning the game just to play, for the school, in 9th, 10th, 11th grade. Because they some of them have never touched a soccer ball before, and he was in the years that he was running the program. I met him along the way, and he started dating my sister-in-law, and they got married, and so I took my oldest son over to his practices. And let him play with his team in terms of in their training sessions and stuff, and got to know the guys, and it was a lot of fun to watch them, because they were out there just pure love of the game. They were robbed of a youth soccer experience because no one provided it for them, and they fell in love with the game. It was so much fun to watch them. And I think about them a lot when I think about this whole conversation. And and it's a conversation that my brother-in-law were having recently. Just, what if communities like that actually had programs that introduce them at a much earlier age? What would they look like? What would their opportunities be? Because out of that group, I mean, there was a goalkeeper that was actually able to get to go and play in college who had never played soccer before. And so it was like, what if these guys had gotten a chance at a much younger age? What would they look like? How would they play? What would their opportunities have been? And we talked about the next generation, these guys who had gone to high school and learned the game there. What happens when they have kids and now they want their kids to play because they actually finally got to play in high school and loved it so much. Maybe their kids can play at a young age, and what happens in the second and third generations. And so it was just kind of a daydream, a thought experiment. But, I look at our country and these communities across the country and just think about all the different things that we could do if we were intentional about making inclusivity and opportunity and access a proactive piece of who we are. And I want to kind of close our chat today with this, which is some barriers to making this happen. And they could be excuses, they could be barriers. I want to toss a few of them at you and get your thoughts on a few. And hopefully by just kind of exposing these and talking through these, we can start to have real meaningful conversations about solutions to overcome these and do the actual work of turning our clubs into true community clubs, community representative clubs. The first barrier to entry, which is one that's probably the most well known when we talk about American youth soccer specifically, is the participation costs. You've mentioned it in today's conversation. The amount of money that's being asked of families, charged to families for these programs is absurd. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's obscene. It's absurd. There's not. I can't find many reasons for the 99% of players in this country to ever be facing down the opportunity to play and a multi-$1,000 check. That is just crazy to me. And so the first thing we see right off the bat is the participation costs. Second is the lack of proactively building bridges. The lack of actually going and doing the work, knocking on doors, having conversations. It's not glamorous. It's not going to be, there's not going to be a news crew following you through the community, and it's not going to be on your Instagram stories. And look at all the great work I'm doing. It's just like, look, put my head down, walk in the neighborhoods, grind, have conversations, get up tomorrow, do it again. It's not the fun, maybe the fun part of your job or something that you love doing, but it's not about whether we love doing it. It's about craving the end result, having my club look like my community. The third is another one that to me is also a very important piece of this, is having representation within the leadership of your organization. So whatever your community looks like, feels like, you need to have your boards look more like that. I mean, even if you go and get all of these Latino families and all of these black families and all these other families into your club, and your board's still all white, we're not done yet. We're not finished. We still got to get into the leadership of the club and have our boards to be representative of our communities as well. We can see this, as you and I both know, is a real big issue at the federation level, at the state association level. So this is not just a community club conversation. This is a national conversation, national leadership issue as well, from the highest boardrooms in the country all the way down into our community clubs. We're not getting this part done well enough across the country. So costs, lack of putting in the work and building relationships, being proactive, and third is having representation in leadership. Are there any other barriers that stand out to you of getting a club to become a reflection of their community?
No, those are the three main things, the three main barriers. I mean, one is overcome with hard work. Every single club can afford to do the free work of, being purposely inclusive in your, recruiting of players, parents, families, and leadership. Everybody can do that. That's just taking the time to go and to actually do it. That one should be easy. And the second one, which is, the leadership aspect of all of this, that one is the same thing, but plus time. We have to go out and find leaders that then will populate, the upper because there aren't a lot of, I wrote this blog post a couple of years ago after I went to the U.S. Soccer AGM the very first time, and there was less than 10 Black people involved as a voting member of the National Council. And, if anybody knows anything about that, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who vote, hundreds. I don't remember what it is, but it's like, what do you think it is, Daniel? Like 600 people, probably 500 people. I mean,
yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And there were less than 10 because I remember sitting there and counting the people that were Black. There were like 8 or 9. And, it was super disappointing and disheartening. Without the first step of every local club, bringing in more Black and Latino people to be leaders at the club level, they'll never advance to the state association level, and then the national board levels, and then the U.S. Soccer Board levels. Like, without it happening at the bottom, we're never going to have the amount of people involved in leadership in this country to matriculate upwards. You can't go out and find, board members. I mean, we need more work at every level. I mean, we talk about that on the West Virginia Soccer Board a lot. I mean, we only have one, African-American representative on our board, and it's not good enough. We have 20 whatever people that are voters, and we have one, so it has to happen. You have to put in the work there, and in short order, you'll find people who care a whole lot and that want to be involved and want to help and are willing to do the work, so you have to do that. And then the first one, the cost barrier, like, that is such an all-encompassing issue. When we talk about not including African-American participants and Hispanic participants and, immigrant communities and marginalized communities, this cost barrier to what is deemed elite soccer in the United States affects every one of those groups. Plus it affects, rural kids, white kids, poor kids. It is the most exclusionary thing about youth sports in the United States. Even as much as I care, right? I couldn't pay the prices. I don't make enough money. Like it's not that I don't want to pay the money, which I don't. let's go ahead and get that out there. I would never pay it, but I couldn't, even if I wanted to, pay the money that some of these clubs are asking and national travel schedule. Like, that's sort of the thing that's lost in a lot of this conversation is without local play options, unless the child's parent has the ability to ship them around the country, or ship them around the region weekend after weekend for a single game or for a tournament or whatever, the kid can't do it. Daniel, you're a busy man. If you are expected to go with your oldest son on a road game to Vegas this weekend and New York next weekend, and then you played at home, and then you played in Chicago the next weekend, then you were at home, and then you're in Miami, like, you have time to take 5 trips in the next 7 weeks.
Yeah, it'd be pretty difficult to keep that going. I mean, one trip is one thing, and that's really that was something my dad raised me on. Was this principle called when the exception becomes the rule? That's when you have a problem. So when I look at youth soccer, for example, it's not. It's not a situation where I go, okay, hey, you want to go and play a tournament and you want to travel, to Vegas to go play the tournament. Okay, well, let's have a conversation about that, because that might be like the one. And you might fundraise for it. You see that sometimes with like a little league baseball team trying to make it to the Little League World Series, and it's kind of like this one-off thing. That's the exception, but the rule is not that every weekend you're traveling, like you mentioned, to Vegas and New York and other places. When the exception becomes a rule and you're having to do that kind of travel, that's completely unnecessary to me. And one of the big arguments you hear is, well, you got to find the best players have to play against the best players. Well, you know what? There's more than one way to do that. You don't have to drive 5 hours to go play the best 12-year-olds.
Let's talk about that, because it's not true. Because when you look at Barcelona and you look at Ajax, you look at the best academies in the world. Not the best academies, not the best teams in the United States, the best academies in the world that are producing world-class players year after year. They play local teams, and their goal differential at the end of their season is plus 80, plus 110, and they are doing just fine developing players. So if you can't tell me with a straight face that if Barcelona can produce world-class players year after year without traveling outside of Barcelona, that you have to take your kid from Dallas, Texas, with all the great players that are in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, and you have to nationally travel. Like, there is absolutely no way you're going to be able to convince me of that.
Oh, I agree.
Now,
my point real quick to that is that even if you're obsessed with playing better competition, right? So let's say that you've got this great 12-year-old and you feel like, well, I've got to put him on a team with 14 other great 12-year-olds, and we're just way better than everybody around here. And you've bought into this mentality, right? Which I agree with you is another one of these myths in American soccer, that you've got a Barcelona has to travel to Madrid and all over Spain for their teams to play. That's not what's happening at the youth level, as you pointed out. But even if you buy into that myth, there's more than one way to provide your kid competition that challenges them. If they're that great as a 12-year-old, then why aren't they playing with a 13, 14, or 15-year-old? I promise you, you don't have to get in the car and drive from Dallas to Houston or get on an airplane and fly to Miami to go play another great 12-year-old and get adequate competition. Have them go play with a 13 or 14-year-old who's already hit puberty. I guarantee you that 12-year-old is going to find a plenty big enough challenge right where he is without having to drive all over or fly all over the freaking country. Now, sorry, back to your point.
No, you're right. And let's talk about how the process that the conversation about the process you just brought forward, the accumulation of talent, right? The aggregation of talent, not the development of talent, the aggregation of talent. It's going to all the smaller clubs around and getting all the best 12-year-olds and putting them on one team so that they're so much better than all the other teams that you can't get a good game. I got my air quotes up. Can't get a good game, right? Why did you do that? Like, why didn't you just let all these players that are developing at a good enough pace at their home club, why didn't you let them stay there and have a local league with 6 teams that were a little more evenly matched with a bunch of great players spread out all over all 6 of them? And then you now have 6 teams worth of great players playing good competitive games in a great environment every weekend. Like, why didn't you, like, what was the purpose of accumulating all of the best players from your local city onto one team? Like, what did that do? But and it's even worse when we talk about these super monster, for-profit organizations with 8 and 10 and 20,000 kids, right? If you run an organization with 6,000 kids in it, I'm not even going to use the 25,000 person ones as an example. We're going to use the big ones with 6,000 kids, 3,000 kids. If you have 3,000 kids that you're in charge of developing and you can't make 4 teams in every age group for both genders that are good and competitive against each other, you suck at developing players. And I'm going to say it just like that. You suck at developing players, and you don't deserve to be in charge of the development of 6,000 kids. Period. End of story. You are the reason why these national leagues exist, because you're not any good at your job. If you can't develop enough good players out of 6,000 kids, 3,000 kids, even 1,000 kids, that you can't create enough teams where you can get competitive games almost every weekend just amongst your own kids, you're bad at your job. Don't allow these people to tell you that there aren't enough good players around when they're in charge of making the good players.
I'm with you, my man. I am with you. You probably heard a little cheering there in the background. Look, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that we have, because of the lack of vision and guidance from the Federation, we have allowed this three-eyed monster to be formed in the American youth soccer landscape. And I get it. If you get into this and you start building something, it's like, oh, let's get more players and let's get more players. And even if you build to 3,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 players, my view is, well, that's great. Okay, fine, whatever. Like that, you've done that, and you've got all these kids, and you're in an area where you can pull that off. The best, if I'm looking at it from the outside, I'm like, well, that's cool. So now you have the ability to run internally your own leagues. Like your club never has to travel.
Right.
That's how I view it. I'm like, man, like you pointed out, hey, man, we built 4 great teams of U15s. Like we rarely have to go play anybody else because the competition here is so high. The training is so high. We're just, playing each other, and we have our U15s and our U16s in the same league. So we've got eight teams playing in a league, and every now and then we'll go play a state cup or we'll go play a showcase tournament. But for the most part, we're here, we're local, we're coming into training, we're doing our work and blah, 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 blah. But that's not what's happened. What's happened is as you pointed out, we've built this faux pyramid of players, and we've said, hey, if you're the best 14-year-old in our area, we're going to put you with the other best 14-year-olds, and we're going to go around to all these other clubs, and we're going to recruit the best 14-year-olds. And I've got my air quotes up now, best 14-year-olds in the area, to come and play on this one team, and they're now going to be exported to the country. So we're going to send them out regularly all over the region or all over the country to play matches. And we feel like this is the best thing for their development. And I look at it and I go like, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Not only from a financial perspective is it crazy, but you're not factoring in how much time you're taking away from the players because you're asking them to travel, whether it's 2 hours to training, whether it's 4 hours for a game. That's all either training time or recovery time. And so those are lost. You know, we talk about basketball and basketball players and going out and just hooping it up on local courts, and we've got this incredible street culture, and we've seen these incredible players that have come from all over America in different places, and it's not because they're getting in their car and driving 4 hours to play basketball. They're going out and they're spending those 4 hours on the court. So that's the sauce. It's not putting them on an airplane. It's getting out and playing.
Dude, you've taken the kids who, look, regardless, even though we know for a fact that these kids are coming almost exclusively from the parents who have the time, ability, and money to put them in these positive situations, because as we know, only these leagues are the only ones that get recruited by colleges and the only ones that get scouted for the national team and by the professional academies and whatever. We already know all that. So they're the only people that can afford to do that. That's the only community that they're coming from. It's the only demographic that they're coming from, right? These are still committed kids. Like, I don't take anything away from these kids. They work hard. You know, they try to play every day or whatever. We've taken them out of their local soccer ecosystem, you know, where the other kids that live in the community will see them and see how good they are. That we've taken them out of their ability to play pickup with their friends and the guys in the neighborhood every day because they're always on a trip or they're always, you know, at a, some showcase event or whatever. We've taken them out of their local community. Okay. So we've taken out a bunch of kids who would be playing pickup. And because they're in the car for 4 hours or they're on a plane or whatever, like every single decision that's made about these kids, not everyone. I mean, that's hyperbole, but you know, a lot of decisions that are made about how we run and manage these, you know, these leagues, these clubs, these events, it's for the benefit of aspirational youth soccer coaches. You know, I don't even know if it's about aspirational soccer clubs that are trying to make a lot of money. I think that a lot of this stuff is about aspirational youth soccer coaches, you know, and it's really unfortunate. And all of this stuff is tied together. You know, all of this stuff is tied together. When we talk, the very first part of this conversation was about making soccer clubs look like your local community. When you take these big, huge, you know, clubs and you create what local soccer looks like, and you have 1,000 kids, 2, 3, 5,000, 10, 25, 30,000 kids, which is what some of these clubs have now, or businesses. I'm not even going to call them clubs. These businesses have, and they've dominated the local soccer scene. If they don't do the hard work of making sure that their business, you know, is representative of the community, we've taken big, giant geographic pieces of the country and we have excluded lots and lots of participants. You know, you don't get 9,000 kids in your business without it being a big city, you know, or a big geographic footprint or both. And if they're not doing the hard work to make sure that they're representative, okay, that's a big city that we've just ruled out every kid, or we've created a caste system where, you know, you can play, it can only be over here in this, you know, organization over here that's just, whatever. It's not allowed to play over here with us. Okay. It's not allowed to compete with us because we've created this way that we're going to manage soccer clubs and we're going to manage how players are even registered and what this registration level allows a player to do or be. And we're even going to give them names like recreational that, tags them with this isn't serious. This sport isn't serious for you. I think that anybody that's followed me on Twitter sees that, like, I hate that term recreational soccer. And I hate that what it puts on a kid, what it puts on a parent, what it puts on a club, because that recreational means this isn't serious. This isn't important, and it is important. This is a community. And, whether or not the kids want to be great or, whether or not the kids want to practice 4 days a week and the coaches are A-licensed and whatever, that's not important about whether it's recreational or competitive or whatever. Like, what's important is this is community. This isn't recreational. This isn't playtime. This is building an important aspect of our community, a pillar in our community. And when you build something like that, that's not something to play around with. You owe it to your community when you're in charge to take all of these important nonprofit pieces of your community and do them the best that you can.
I agree. I want to close our chat today and leave everyone with this as we close the show. If money wasn't involved, would you be involved? If money wasn't involved, would you be involved? To me, that is the big evaluating question for so many who are involved in leadership within American soccer, coaches, club leaders, etc. This idea that if money wasn't involved, would you be involved for the love of the game? I think we need a serious gut check in this country for a variety of reasons. And we've had a long conversation today about a lot of those reasons. And I want to leave us with that question to ponder as we close today's show. Thanks for watching, as always. Big thanks to Chris for coming on the show, as always. You can watch at danielworkman.com/watch. We'll see everyone again tomorrow.